All right, man, peace. So Colin Kaepernick, the embattled former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, who currently is being puppeted by his MK handler girlfriend, Nessa Diab, once again decided to crawl out of the sunken place and post on Twitter a quote from Mr. Jackie Robinson. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Not only are we asking you to score the ball, rebound the ball, assist the ball, half of the time we're asking you to coach the team and be the GM as well. I'm sorry, if you ask me, LeBron James is undoubtedly more valuable to his team than James Harden.
And you're undoubtedly more valuable in the kitchen than you are trying to be a sports pundit. Nobody wants to hear your bullshit. Please, go call your husband, text him, ask him how his day is going. Nobody gives a shit about your hot takes on LeBron James. God bless you, sister. Have a wonderful day.
And that's my take.
Good. Take your ass back in the kitchen.
Make yourself heard on First Take Your Take. I like it. She brought it. Head over to Facebook. Check out our debates on Facebook Watch. Post your video reaction for a chance to debate with Stephen A. or Max. It's a good deal. Meanwhile, yesterday, Colin Kaepernick tweeted this quote from the great Jackie Robinson on the anniversary of him breaking the color barrier in baseball. I cannot stand and sing the anthem. I cannot salute the flag. I know that I'm a black man in a white world.
Now, of course, this is more race baiting and race mongering by the mainstream liberal sports media, a faction that does not care about the so-called black man at all. But this is a narrative that they're trying to continue to propagate in their news cycle to try to foment more antagonism between simple-minded so-called blacks and many of these Caucasians who are the descendants of white trash. Let's understand something. Jackie Robinson made this statement near the end of his life when he finally realized that many of the Caucasians that he was working under, people like Branch Rickey and later on Richard Nixon and the Rockefellers, were only using him as a prop. But he didn't understand that until the very, very end. He forced his children to live in Caucasian neighborhoods because he wanted to be a beacon of integration. He modeled himself as someone that people should imitate and mimic. And what happened is that in the mid-60s, many of the more militaristic or quote-unquote militant black movements started to reject him. And then he himself was rejected by many of the Caucasian factions that he thought were going to have his back, because what he realized is that they themselves did not believe in what they were teaching him to teach his people. That is why he got very resentful near the end of his life, and he made this statement. There was an excellent Jackie Robinson biographical documentary that was on PBS maybe about a year or so ago that was produced by Mr. Ken Burns, who's a great documentarian. And I saw a lot of this verbiage within that documentary where Jackie Robinson himself was stating that he could no longer sing the national anthem, that he could no longer salute the flag, things of that nature. He started to shy away from the limelight, especially after his health was starting to decline. But that was all after he realized that he was being used as a pawn. Brothers, I tell you guys this all the time. You're not supposed to get caught up in all of these political comings and goings that so many of these liberal Negroes want to involve themselves in. They get involved in all these protests and this quote-unquote activism, and they have no real answers because behind the scenes, they want to get that hug. Jackie Robinson wanted that hug. And he wanted the hug so bad that it cost him his life. He was certainly an asset. That's why they allowed him to be the front man for things like Chock full of nuts or the first quote-unquote black-owned bank, which really was just an outlet, a mechanism for the Rockefellers to make so-called blacks believe that there was a black-owned bank in Harlem, when in reality, they were the fount of that bank. But anyway, we're going to see how Colin Kaepernick tries to align himself to Jackie Robinson, and that will give me the opportunity to make certain statements about Colin Kaepernick and Jackie Robinson. So they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
World. This quote comes from part of Robinson's preface to his autobiography in 1972. Stephen A., do you like that Kaepernick tweeted this out, this comparison here?
Well, it's necessary for Colin Kaepernick to align himself with people like Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali, because he and his handlers understand how those images resonate in the subconscious of so-called black people, because these are the people that so-called blacks are getting taught about in the narrative called the educational system. And that is a narrative. Everything that you learn in school historically is narrative. There is no real history being taught in school. It's all narrative. And they teach you and tell you who it is that you should hold in high esteem. People like Jackie Robinson and Martin Luther King and a lot of these brothers who meant well in their own mind. They thought that they were doing the right thing because they were being taken behind the curtain per se, and they were being told certain things by the Caucasian, and they were just so happy to be the one who was chosen to act as the intermediary between these enlightened Caucasians and the masses of so-called blacks who were the dregs of society, that they were willing to do whatever they were told until the very end when they realized what they were being used for, and they were kicked to the side like an old hoe. And that's why Jackie Robinson died in his early 50s looking like he was in his late 70s.
Well, it depends on what the intent was. If the intent was just to highlight and illuminate the rationale and the reason behind his protest, I have absolutely no problem whatsoever. He's earned the right to do what he wants to do. He recognizes the repercussions that will come with it. And if he's willing to take that position, more power to him, I suppose.
The reason why he can continue to make these stands, quote unquote, Stephen A. Smith, is because he has backers. He has sponsors. He has a faction that is sponsoring him, Stephen A. Smith. When are you going to get that through your thick head, brother? Colin Kaepernick is not who you think he is. And when I say he's not who you think he is, he does not truly stand for what you believe he stands for. He doesn't know what he stands for. That's why he's kneeling. That's representative of the fact that he's not standing. He's not willing to stand because he does not know who he is. He's a very confused dude. And he's a prop for the boule, a.k.a. his segment of the boule known as Kappa Alpha Psi. Beyond that, we all know that he's under the control of his girl, his handler, Nessa Diab, and her former paramour, Alden Smith, is currently bugging out of his damn mind. So whatever mojo, whatever witchcraft, whatever magic that chick is working on these dudes is very much akin to what the Kardashians work on their subjects. So-called black men, brothers, please be very, very alert and aware of the energies that people are bringing your way, especially in the form of the woman. Now, in regards to Colin Kaepernick, I believe that he's just a prop. He's been an asset for most of his entire life. He's just a plant in the NFL meant to spread discord and confusion and chaos. And he's still trying to do so. He knows that he's never going to get back into the NFL. But he has to keep his name relevant. He has to keep himself out there. That's why he puts forth these tweets and these text messages and these posts on Instagram to make it look like he's still concerned about being in the NFL. And there may come a time when the NFL may succumb if there is a powerful entity that is planted within the upper echelon of the NFL that demands that Colin Kaepernick be brought back in to wrap up that narrative. Who knows? But as of right now, the decisions that are being made for Colin Kaepernick are not conducive to being allowed back into the NFL. For all intents and purposes, he's nothing but a shit starter. And let me say this, I mentioned this already. Within the inner sanctums of quote-unquote Kappa Alpha Psi, they venerate Thoth or Tahuti, who is Cush. They also venerate Apollo. Once again, brothers, all these people, they worship the same people. They worship the same gods. At the top of the ladder is the Baphomet. And it would not surprise me if they sacrifice Colin Kaepernick somewhere down the line to put a nice little bow on this storyline. Who the hell knows?
I support his right to do it, and I still believe that he should be employed in the NFL. He shouldn't be ostracized because of that one specific thing.
Well, the reason why he's not employed in the NFL is because at best he's a marginal quarterback. He was on his way out of the NFL until all of a sudden he decided that he was going to become Huey P. Newton, or his handlers decided that for him. Nobody cared about Colin Kaepernick before this dude grew out an afro and started getting on one knee. Come on, man.
Absolutely. But I will say this. We're going to put a stop to all of this stuff for those out there that try to martyr him to the point where you think for 1 second that he needs to be mentioned in the same sentence as Jackie Robinson. You better pump them damn brakes. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm telling you right now. So folks going to get cussed out on national television if I hear somebody saying something like that. He is not comparable to the great Jackie Robinson.
You tell him, homegirl.
Jackie Robinson was the man that was responsible for integrating the sport of Major League Baseball.
No, not quite. He was the test case that was utilized to reintegrate the sport of Major League Baseball. contrary to popular opinion, Major League Baseball had black athletes throughout the 1800s. In the latter 1800s, all of the black athletes within the sport of baseball were ran out. And then throughout the 1930s and early 40s, the communist factions of the United States, or that were within the United States of America, decided that sports would be a great playground to promote quote-unquote integrationism, which was meant to destabilize the social structure of the United States. They understood that the so-called American Negro was being mistreated, and since they were being mistreated, they would be utilized as great pawns, very much like women and homosexuals, etc. Certain strata of the quote-unquote American society that were being marginalized, which could be used as proxies to promote the agenda of the quote-unquote communists/Marxists, who are really just agents of the international bankers, who are Luciferians, believe it or not. All Marxism is/communism is meant to do is destabilize society at large by intermingling all of these various groups together so that no one really knows what's going on. That's why I always tell you, brothers, they want to concentrate on the so-called black man and make him believe that he should join hands with the homosexuals and with the feminist movement, so on and so forth, and everyone is supposed to be going against the so-called Caucasian male. And then once you quote-unquote conquer the Caucasian male, that's going to start the age of Shangri-La, where everybody's going to be happy and there's not going to be any more problems. No. After that, it's only going to go into the next phase where they implement the quote-unquote RFID chip. That's all it's about. That's why they want to take away your guns. But a lot of it started back in the 30s and 40s with many of the communist groups throughout America who wanted to utilize the so-called Negro as a guinea pig. You have very prominent actors like Paul Robeson, who was a communist himself, and he was actually brought before Congress, if I remember correctly. Jackie Robinson was called in a hearing to testify against Paul Robeson. He really did not want to do it initially, but he felt like he had to, because if he didn't, his career could be ruined in Major League Baseball. I'm trying to remember what year it was. It was in the late 40s. But they had Jackie Robinson act as a character witness against Paul Robeson, who was probably the most prominent so-called black actor of the early 20th century, who was an out-and-out communist. So-called blacks have always been targeted for the Communist Party from the early 20th century because they knew, once again, that our people had been disenfranchised and that, therefore, we would be willing to assist them in trying to throw off the quote-unquote shackles of American democracy because it had never worked for us. This is why they were able to basically plant the seeds within the brain of Mr. Martin Luther King and raise him up as an agent for chaos within America. And once they were done with him, they blew his brains out. And once again, brothers, and I always say this, communism is just Marxism, and Marxism is just Luciferianism. That's why they kill these people according to certain dates and in certain rituals. And I'll probably be covering Martin Luther King again, but he was killed in front of his hotel room, which was room 306. And according to the testimony of many of Martin Luther King's compatriots, when he woke up that morning, he was very jubilant, he was happy, he was singing and dancing. Why do I believe he was doing that? Because he most likely had been receiving calls for the previous month or so telling him that he was going to be killed very soon. And he probably received a call the night before to tell him that he was going to be killed that day. And he knew. And notice the city that he was killed in was Memphis, which was a prominent city in ancient Kemet. Okay? He was sacrificed to Heru. That's why that number was 306. They put him in that hotel room and they set him up lovely. And Jesse Jackson already knew that he was going to be allowed to take over the so-called civil rights movement after Martin Luther King was dispatched and done away with. That's why when Martin Luther King tried to transition the so-called civil rights movement over to supporting the sanitation workers and speaking against the Vietnam War, people like Bayard Rustin stepped away and said, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I trained you for. Because Bayard Rustin was a plant. He was a pansexual. But you know what? I'll cover a lot of that in another video. I've already done a video on Martin Luther King, but I'll be touching on him again in the near future. But Jackie Robinson, he was the sports branch of the communist infiltration of the inner workings of America to promote integration. And once they were done with him, they moved him to the side. He was running behind Richard Nixon and Nelson Rockefeller, thinking that they were going to help him help so-called black people. And when he realized that they were not, that's when he turned against America and started talking about he wasn't going to pledge allegiance to the flag and sing the national anthem. But they were done with him.
Jackie Robinson was coming up in a time where we were devoid of civil rights, where we couldn't use the same restaurants or the same bathrooms, or we couldn't patronize the same businesses or the water fountains or anything.
You see that number 42? Once again, that is for Tahuti or Thoth, aka Kush. Those numbers always resonate. Am I saying that Jackie Robinson was a plant or agent per se, like mind control? No. But he was trained and he was prepped for what he was going to do. That's why Branch Rickey told him. And he used a lot of psychological maneuvers on Jackie Robinson. He told him, I need a black man who's strong enough to not fight back. They wouldn't tell that to a Caucasian. When they raise up their Caucasian sons, they tell them to be strong and fight back and show your manliness. But when it came to a person like Jackie Robinson, Branch Rickey told him, I need a black man who's strong enough to not fight back. That's why they retired the number 42 in Major League Baseball, because that number 42 has a high resonance. When they did that biographical feature on Jackie Robinson starring Chadwick Boseman, who himself played the quote-unquote Black Panther, who played Heru. They have plans for Mr. Chadwick Boseman. I have little doubt about that. They may have brought him into the industry with plans for him. Who knows? Point being is this, that number 42 has a high resonance for them. Numbers like 42, 23, 13, they represent things on a high spiritual level on the left-hand side.
Like that. Jackie Robinson grew up at a time with such alarming hostility that it sparked the civil rights movement, for crying out loud, in certain respects, and there is no question about that. When we look at that and we juxtapose that to Colin Kaepernick, with all due respect, we appreciate his willingness to bring sensitivity and awareness to racial oppression.
In other words, he's brought nothing new. He has nothing real to say, because he does not even understand what he represents. And those numbers, they also have resonance on the right-hand side, by the way. But for the sake of speaking about this topic, Jackie Robinson and many of these athletes that are being used as pawns, whether they be monarch athletes or whatever, maybe they're just disillusioned, those numbers also have a resonance on the left-hand side as well. That's why those numbers get exalted, 23 and 6 and 33, 32, 13, 42. The list goes on and on.
Racial inequality, police brutality, etc. But this is an NFL player that made in excess of $40 million. This is an NFL player that restructured his deal so he can opt out a year earlier because he wanted to sit up there and maximize the opportunities that were available to him.
Allegedly, what he thought were going to be available to him.
And Max Kellerman, I'll go as far as to say this. You know one thing that folks haven't realized that Colin Kaepernick is actually comparable to? Are you ready for this? Are you sitting down for this one, Max Kellerman?
Oh, I already know who he's comparable to. James Bond. Because that motherfucker is a secret agent.
He's actually comparable to President Donald Trump. Allow me to explain real quick.
Yeah, I want to hear this bullshit.
Donald Trump was the former owner for the USFL, who tried to sue the NFL for $1.7 billion. He won the case, but won a grand total of $1. It assisted in ruining the USFL, certainly ruined his chances of ultimately getting what he really wanted, which was to own an NFL team, because then in 2014, years later, when he wanted to own the Buffalo Bills, they still didn't want him to be a part of their clique. So here you have a white billionaire who wants to become a part of the league and couldn't get in. Colin Kaepernick can't get back in. I understand that the two things really don't have much to do with one another.
So why the hell did you bring it up? I'm gonna start calling you dumbass Mr. Fantastic, because you're reaching, man. You're reaching.
But I'm saying the irony is that Donald Trump, before he ever decided to run for president, wanted to be an owner for the National Football League, and they would not let him in. And as a result, it sparked him to decide to try to run for the presidency.
They need to create a button where they could put Stephen A. Smith on mute while he's still talking. Because, you know what, I'm done with his ass. Max Kellerman is flabbergasted, but we know why he started tweaking. Anytime he hears the name Donald Trump, he just starts getting the shivers. He had to close one eye. He looked like he had OD'd on methamphetamines again, allegedly.
Of the United States of America, which he ultimately succeeded in doing so, by the way. And it was spearheaded by the fact they would not let him in the league. So anybody that affects their bottom line is somebody that they would ostracize. And Colin Kaepernick.
Max can't take it no more. He's like, Stephen A., I haven't used this word in years, but nigger, I don't like you.
Kaepernick is the latest example of that.
It is much better to use Jackie Robinson as a comparison. He is much more like, Colin Kaepernick is much more like Jackie Robinson than Donald Trump, if you want to make a comparison. I understand what you're doing. You're saying it's analogous in this way. It's ironic in this
That's all
way.
I'm saying.
And then rather than debate that...
And as usual, it's a very bad analogy. Stephen A. Smith, analogies are not your strong suit. When I want to hear someone make an analogy, I'll listen to someone like Colin Kaepernick. That's not your strong suit, brother. Stick to the bombast.
I just want to point out, you're using someone else to make a point. That's what Kaepernick is doing about Jackie Robinson. He's not invoking Jackie Robinson's name to say, I am as important as Jackie Robinson.
No, actually he is, but he's doing it in a subconscious way. That's how the brain works. The brain functions associatively, Max Kellerman. When you walk into your mother's house and you smell her cooking, not only do you get hungry, but you think back to 20 years ago when she cooked Thanksgiving dinner or when she baked you a cake for your birthday. That's how the brain works. So when people read that tweet from Colin Kaepernick, subconsciously they're going to associate him with Jackie Robinson. Why is that? Because he's trying to create a cult of personality so that people will follow him. That's how that works.
By the way, just as Jackie Robinson, if you wanted to bring up Frederick Douglass, people would have said, you dare put yourself in the same, and it would just be in a limited way what Frederick Douglass experienced over here, maybe Jackie Robinson experienced over there. And you know what people would say had Jackie Robinson done that? Did you dare to compare the plight of black people today to the plight of black people in Frederick Douglass's day? Look at how much better it's gotten for black people here in the late 1940s.
Well, you do the same thing, Max Kellerman. If a so-called black man were to reject your liberal Caucasian meanderings, you will quickly assert that things are better for so-called black people today than they were 50 or 60 years ago. Just as a defense mechanism, you would. You may deny that now because you're not directly under attack from a so-called black man who's not going to fall for your liberal bullshit. But if that situation were to arise, you would do the same thing. Sure you would.
And they'd be right. It did get much better. It was better to be black in the 1940s than it was 100 years before.
How would you know that, sir? You see that? You just did what you claimed others shouldn't be doing, or what you implied that others shouldn't be doing. How could you speak for the so-called black man and tell him when things were better or worse?
That's right. That doesn't mean it was okay. That doesn't mean racism wasn't alive and kicking at black people in the 1940s. And that doesn't mean that because things had gotten better, African Americans should have said, okay, you know what, they got better, good enough. And now it's good enough that we don't need to protest in the same way or have an urgent need for change. Just as today, it is not comparable to racism. Racism today is not comparable in this country, yet not comparable to the 1940s in this country. There was a greater degree of it.
How would you know that, sir? That seems very assumptive on your part. As anyone who studied even the rudimentary aspects of physics would know, energy is never gained or lost, it's just transferred. And that's the same way that society works. When we look at the 1930s and 40s, the quote-unquote racism of that time, or the rulership methods of that time, were different. They were more overt. So the Jim Crow laws have been transferred over into the prison industrial complex. It's the same thing, it's just different.
Doesn't mean it's okay today. Doesn't mean that there is an urgent need for change and that someone like Colin Kaepernick cannot be instrumental in that change. He can be. I think he has been.
No, he has not been at all. But you like him as a paragon of quote-unquote liberalism. That's what his use is. That's what his necessity is to foment some type of chaos in this society. For the most part, it's failed because people are starting to see through a lot of the bullshit. And that is the catch-22 of the internet, is that now people can speak to each other directly and see past a lot of the buffoonery of the mainstream quote-unquote media.
And I don't think there's a problem with him pointing out, because it's the principle here. Jackie Robinson in his day said he didn't feel right about standing up for the national anthem. And Colin Kaepernick is just pointing out Jackie Robinson didn't, and neither did I.
Well, this is why I put Jackie Robinson making his statements pertaining to the national anthem in the context that I did, because I thought that that was important. When you see that quote, you think, wow, I didn't know Jackie Robinson said that while he was playing baseball. He didn't. He said that near the end of his life, once he realized what he had been used for, and once he understood that the elite level Caucasians who were sponsoring him, who were putting a battery in his back, were never sincere to begin with. That's when he came to those revelations, and that's why he made that statement. Colin Kaepernick is in the midst of being pawned. He doesn't know up from down. And just to go on another level, I have no doubt that he is nothing but an MK asset, and that his handler is Miss Nessa Diab.
Neither do I. And if someone else wants to point out, well, Jackie Robinson didn't because things were far worse in his day. Colin Kaepernick, things are better enough now that you stand. I would point out the Frederick Douglass comparison. And I would, just because things had gotten better by Robinson's day doesn't mean it was all the way okay. And I would also point out that it's no one else's business to tell Colin Kaepernick how he should exercise his First Amendment rights. And if you want to...
Well, I don't think that you truly believe that in practice. You only believe that in words, sir, because you won't even let Stephen A. Smith speak on a topic that one would think would be more relevant, more pertinent to him as a so-called black man than to you. But as I've already noted, when it comes to Mr. Max Kellerman and the liberal Caucasians that have his mindset, they're dealing with the burden that's known as the white man's burden. They believe that it's their job to inform the so-called Negro on how they should think, what they should feel, and what's the best way to emerge out of the morass, emerge out of the affliction of so-called Caucasian racism.
Want to argue, well, he's in the workplace, he doesn't have the right to say whatever he wants and keep a job. I would argue that's true, but he also can't be compelled to parrot his employer's speech by standing for the national anthem in order to keep his job.
Well, what I would ask you to do is be careful about what you're saying when you're quoting me. It's one thing to take your position. It's another thing to interpret what I'm saying, especially inaccurately on a subject as sensitive as this one. I did not lament exactly. I did not lament what Colin Kaepernick said. What I'm talking about is the people who would take what he said and compare him to Jackie Robinson. I wasn't saying he was comparing himself to Jackie Robinson.
Well, here's the problem, Stephen A. Smith. He didn't say anything. All he did was cite something that Jackie Robinson stated. So if you're trying to check the people who are going to align him with Jackie Robinson, that's too late, sir. The amount of coverage that ESPN has given to Colin Kaepernick has allowed him to create a certain level of a cult of personality, which is starting to die down now, and it's going to continue to die down because he's just not a relevant person. He doesn't have enough to say in real time to maintain any type of a cult of personality or a following per se. So he needs to tweet intermittently to keep people aware of the fact that he should be considered some type of leader on race relations.
I said folks out there who would sit up there and try to draw a correlation between him and Jackie Robinson need to be incredibly careful, because I hear a lot of people from my community that are doing such a thing, and I don't think it's apropos.
Well, most so-called black people are looking for some type of a leader, which is unfortunate, and it really is only reflective of the dearth of male leadership in the home. Whenever something is affected, it's going to affect everything else around it, like a domino. So when you take the so-called black man out the home, now everyone is searching for male leadership on a macrocosmic level as opposed to a microcosmic level, because there's no one to turn to in the home. Now they're looking for figures on television to be leaders.
It's two different scenarios. It's two different situations. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, let's also be clear about something here as well. You're absolutely right. Just because times were different back then doesn't mean that racism isn't still alive and strong in this day and age. I think we've seen enough to know that. But in the same breath, the reason why I brought up the comparison to Donald Trump, not comparing Colin Kaepernick to Donald Trump as individuals, but comparing the impact of their situations in terms of the NFL, is because it proves my point about the NFL. The NFL owners don't give a damn about anything but their bottom line.
And that's the only thing that they're supposed to care about, Stephen A. Smith.
They're trying to make money. We can argue that there's a heightened level of sensitivity that they should have, but in the end, whether it's white or black, what they have proven time and time again, concussion issues, protests, and everything in between, is that the color that they care about most is green.
Absolutely. And if Colin Kaepernick could still play, he would transcend all the bullshit that he's trying to initiate within the NFL if people thought that he would be a viable quarterback option for their team. And he's just not. No one who's going to be, at best, a marginal backup is worth all that silliness, buffoonery, and two-dimensional thinking and emotionality. But anyway, that's it on this video. What Jackie Robinson and Colin Kaepernick both have in common is that I believe that they're both going to end their lives in a very bitter fashion. But anyway, peace.